In 2020, a historian paid $15,000 for a mysterious rainbow script, one of the last surviving copies of Gone with the Wind's original screenplay. Inside were scenes so controversial they were ordered destroyed, brutal violence against slaves, Atlanta in flames, and a moment where Rhett Butler nearly ends it all. For 80 years, these lost scenes stayed buried. Now, we finally know why Hollywood's most famous movie was hiding its darkest secrets. The story of Gone with the Wind started when novelist Margaret Mitchell was stuck at home in Atlanta because of an ankle injury and needed something to do. She grabbed an old Remington typewriter and began working on a story. The book came out on June 30th, 1936, and it became a huge success right away. Before it even hit stores, 50,000 copies had already been sold. In just 6 months, it sold 1 million copies, which was amazing since it was during the Great Depression. By 1939, it had sold 1.5 million copies, and by 1946, it reached 3.7 million in the US alone. People loved the story, and it became one of the most popular books ever written, second only to the Bible. In 1937, Mitchell won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, showing how much critics admired her work. The book's dramatic story about the Civil War and Reconstruction captivated readers everywhere. Not long after the book came out, producer David O. Selznick bought the movie rights in July 1936. He paid $50,000, which was a record amount for a first novel at the time. At first, Selznick wasn't sure if he should make the movie, but his story editor, Kay Brown, and business partner John Hay Whitney convinced him. That decision set off one of the biggest and most expensive movie projects ever. Selznick had to work hard to get the money to make the movie. He made a deal with MGM, which loaned him Clark Gable to play Rhett Butler and gave him $1.25 million to help with production costs. In return, MGM got the rights to distribute the movie. The budget eventually grew to $3.85 million, making it one of the most expensive films ever made at the time. Selznick was involved in every part of the process, from the script to the casting, and he was determined to make the movie as good as possible. Finding the right actress to play Scarlett O'Hara was a huge challenge. Selznick spent 2 years searching from 1936 to 1938. Over 1,400 actresses were interviewed and 90 were given screen tests. Famous stars like Katharine Hepburn, Bette Davis, and Joan Crawford were considered, but none of them felt right. Selznick even held a national search, asking unknown women to audition for the role. It was a clever way to keep people interested in the project before filming even started. The search eventually came down to 4 actresses: John Arthur, Joan Bennett, Paulette Goddard, and Vivien Leigh. Vivien Leigh wasn't as famous as the others, but she loved the book and wanted the role badly. She even had photos taken of herself dressed as Scarlett and sent them to Selznick. Her big chance came when she visited the set during the filming of the Burning of Atlanta scene. Selznick's brother introduced her, and after she read for the part, Selznick was convinced. On January 13, 1939, he announced that Vivien Leigh would play Scarlett. The rest of the cast was just as carefully chosen. Selznick always wanted Clark Gable as Rhett Butler and managed to get him through his deal with MGM. Leslie Howard played Ashley Wilkes, and Olivia de Havilland played Melanie Hamilton. Hattie McDaniel, cast as Mammy, became the first African-American to win an Oscar for her performance, making history. Making Gone with the Wind was full of problems and drama. Turning Margaret Mitchell's huge 1,037-page novel into a movie script wasn't easy. Over a dozen writers worked on it, including F. Scott Fitzgerald. It took 3 years and many rewrites. The first version of the script was by Sidney Howard, but it was so long it would have made the movie 6 hours. David O. Selznick, the producer, wanted the script to stay loyal to the book. This caused fights between the writers. Some wanted the story to feel romantic and dreamy, while others wanted to show the harsh reality of slavery. Early drafts even had scenes showing slaves being mistreated, like beatings and threats, but these were removed. Still, the arguments over what to keep slowed everything down. In the middle of the chaos, Selznick hired Ben Hecht, to rewrite the script in just 5 days. Hecht quickly worked on the first half of the story, using Howard's old draft. The language in the script also caused issues, as some parts used offensive descriptions directly from the book. The constant changes delayed filming for 2 years, and the script wasn't fully done until just before the movie came out. But the problems didn't stop there. The movie had issues with directors too. The first director, George Cukor, was fired after 18 days of filming. Cukor was close with the lead actresses, Vivien Leigh and Olivia de Havilland, and had even told Leigh in person she got the role of Scarlett O'Hara. But Selznick thought Cukor was too slow, and Clark Gable, who played Rhett Butler, didn't like him. Gable felt Cukor focused too much on Leigh and not enough on him. Selznick replaced Cukor with Victor Fleming, who had been directing The Wizard of Oz. Fleming was rougher and more direct, which upset Leigh. They argued often, and at one point, Fleming told her to stick this script up your royal British ass. Even after being fired, Cukor secretly helped Leigh and de Havilland with their performances. Later, Fleming had to leave briefly because he got exhausted, so another director, Sam Wood, stepped in for 2 weeks. The set was full of tension. Gable didn't want to play Rhett Butler at first, but took the role because he needed the money. He and Leigh didn't get along, and Leigh complained about his bad breath during kissing scenes because of his false teeth. Leigh also struggled with long hours, criticism for being British, and the pressure of playing such an iconic role. She began having mood swings and breakdowns on set. Hattie McDaniel, who played Mammy, also faced challenges. She became the first African American to win an Oscar, but she wasn't allowed to attend the Atlanta premiere because of segregation laws. Selznick's perfectionism made things even harder. He wanted control over every little detail. He sent endless notes to the directors and actors about changes he wanted. He kept rewriting the script, even after scenes were already filmed. This left the cast and crew confused and frustrated. Selznick often worked for days without sleep, using drugs to stay awake. He micromanaged everything, even costumes, and how extras stood in scenes. His demands slowed things down, but also helped make the movie unforgettable. Despite all the problems, Gone with the Wind premiered in December 1939 and became a massive success. Selznick's obsession and the hard work of everyone involved paid off, creating one of the most famous movies ever made. In 2020, something amazing happened in the world of film history. David Vincent Kymel, a historian from Yale, was looking through an online bookstore when he found something extraordinary. It was a rare script from the famous 1939 movie Gone with the Wind. This wasn't just any script. It was a rainbow script, named for its pages in different colors, showing all the changes made during the production. Kymel knew right away how special this find was and decided to buy it, paying an incredible $15,000 for the piece of history. The rainbow script is 301 pages long and was confirmed to be authentic by Bonhams, a respected auction house. These scripts got their name because producer David O. Selznick would use pages in different colors to track all the revisions he demanded. What makes this script so rare is that Selznick ordered all shooting scripts to be destroyed once the film was finished. Somehow, this one survived. It originally belonged to Fred Schuessler, the film's casting director. No one knows why Schuessler didn't follow the destruction order, but his choice saved an incredible piece of history. Kymel's discovery is a big deal because it gives film historians a unique look at how Gone with the Wind was made. According to Kymel, fewer than 6 of these scripts still exist, which makes each one incredibly valuable. This script reveals lost scenes that were cut from the final version of the movie. Dated between February 27th and June 25th, 1939, it shows just how much the film changed during its production. This script revealed parts of the story that were much darker than what audiences saw in the final movie. It showed a harsher reality of slavery on Scarlett O'Hara's plantation, Tara. Many of these scenes were brutal and emotional, much more than what was left in the finished film. In one shocking scene, Scarlett hit a house slave with a rod and yelled, "Sit up, you fool, before I wear this out on you." Another scene had her threatening to kick Mammy off the plantation because she wasn't working hard enough. Some of these scenes weren't just written, they were actually filmed. Photographs from the set showed this, but later they were removed. possibly before or after a test screening on September 9, 1939, in Riverside, California. Producer David O. Selznick secretly showed the unfinished movie to a locked-in audience at the Fox Theater. It's possible these cut scenes were part of that version, but they never made it to the final release. Prissy, the character in Gone with the Wind, played by Butterfly McQueen, is one of the most talked-about parts of the movie. In the film, Prissy looks like a helpless and silly character, but the original script showed a much darker side to her story. Scarlett O'Hara, played by Vivien Leigh, was supposed to treat Prissy much worse in the earlier version. In one shocking scene that was cut, Scarlett threatens her by saying, "I'll sell you down the river. You'll never see your mother again, or anybody you know, and I'll sell you for a field hand too." In the final movie, Scarlett still slaps Prissy and yells at her, but these harsh words were left out, making the scene less brutal. There were many similar moments in the script. Scarlett threatened to skin alive an enslaved person or to sell them south. These threats showed up often, not just once, suggesting that some writers wanted to highlight the real cruelty of slavery. The making of Gone with the Wind had its own drama, especially over how to show slavery. Keimel describes this as a civil war between the writers. One group, called the Romantics, wanted the movie to show the Old South as a beautiful and happy place. F. Scott Fitzgerald, a famous writer, was part of this group. He suggested showing slaves singing and working in lovely, peaceful scenes to make the past seem perfect and nostalgic. The other group, called the Realists, wanted to show the truth about slavery, even if it was ugly. Writers like Sidney Howard and Oliver H.P. Garrett were part of this group. Howard's version of the story was long and brutally honest. It would have been a 6-hour movie, with scenes that didn't hold back on showing how terrible slavery really was. Some of these scenes were so intense, they were removed even before the final script was made. This fight between the writers made the script feel mixed and conflicted. Producer David O. Selznick had to decide what to keep and what to cut. In the end, he chose to make the movie less harsh, focusing on pleasing white audiences. This meant cutting many of the tough scenes about slavery and showing a more romantic and soft version of the Old South. Meanwhile, there was a Rhett Butler's darkest moment from Gone with the Wind, which was hidden for years. It happens after his daughter Bonnie dies, leaving him in deep despair. The scene shows Rhett sitting alone in his study, holding a revolver. His face is filled with pain as he looks at the gun, turning it over in his hands. He talks to himself, saying life feels empty and meaningless without Bonnie. Slowly, Rhett raises the gun to his temple, his hand shaking. But just as he's about to pull the trigger, a noise from outside the room startles him. He stops, lowers the gun, and breaks down into tears. This powerful moment, which showed a side of Rhett no one had seen before, was filmed on June 12, 1939. Clark Gable gave such an emotional performance that people on set were visibly shaken. But this scene never made it to the movie when it premiered on December 15, 1939, in Atlanta. If this scene had stayed in the movie, it would have completely changed how people saw Rhett Butler. In the version we know, Rhett deals with Bonnie's death by drinking and pulling away from everyone, but this deleted scene showed just how broken and lost he really was. It would have made him more than just a charming, confident man. It would have shown him as someone deeply hurt, struggling to go on. This raw moment would have made people understand why he became so distant from Scarlett and why he eventually left her. It would have also made Rhett more relatable, showing that even he wasn't invincible. Producer David O. Selznick decided to cut the scene, and there were many reasons behind this choice. The movie was already extremely long, almost 4 hours, and Selznick worried this heavy scene might slow it down even more. At the time, movies had to follow strict censorship rules called the Hays Code. Showing something like taking own life could have caused problems with censors or even led to a stricter rating, which might have hurt the film's box office success. Another big reason was how the scene might affect Rhett's image. Selznick and his team worked hard to make Rhett a strong, likable, romantic lead. They feared that showing him in such a vulnerable state might make him less appealing, especially to women who were a key audience for the film. After a lot of debate, Selznick decided on July 1st, 1939, to leave the scene out. This decision kept the film's focus more on the grand romance and drama that audiences expected. Then there was a scene about Atlanta riots during the Civil War in 1864. It was meant to capture the city's collapse when Union forces, led by General Sherman, took control on September 1st. Rhett Butler, played by Clark Gable, would have been seen riding through the ruined streets on horseback. Everything around him was described as chaotic and destroyed. People were looting stores, carrying stolen items through streets covered in broken glass, wrecked wagons, and debris. Fires burned everywhere, lighting up the city in an eerie orange glow. At one point, Rhett's horse was supposed to stop so the audience could see the scale of the destruction. Faces filled with fear, buildings crumbling, and the desperate energy of people losing everything. The scene also included Confederate soldiers pouring into Atlanta, injured and exhausted. Makeshift hospitals were overcrowded, and the city looked like it couldn't handle the chaos. This reflected the real-life events of the Battle of Atlanta, where Confederate forces, led by General John Bell Hood, made a failed attempt to stop Sherman's army. The destruction and disorder would have shown the complete collapse of Southern life during the war, contrasting sharply with earlier depictions of Atlanta as proud and thriving. One unusual part of this deleted scene was a brief moment showing a cross-dressing rioter. This character was described as a man running in front of a wagon filled with dresses. It might seem strange, but it added an extra layer to the chaos. Maybe it was meant to symbolize how the normal rules of society were breaking down as Atlanta fell. Or maybe it hinted at deeper stories from that time, like women dressing as men to join the fighting. The inclusion of this character would have created a striking contrast with Rhett's strong, masculine presence, showing a different side of the chaos. It was a bold and unconventional idea, especially for a movie made in 1939, and it gave a glimpse into the filmmaker's willingness to take risks, even if they decided not to keep it. Including this scene in the film would have completely changed its tone. The fall of Atlanta, with its destruction and panic, would have shown the harsh realities of war instead of the romanticized version of the South that the movie mostly focused on. It would have forced viewers to see the suffering of ordinary people as the war tore apart their lives. The burning city could have served as a powerful symbol of the Old South's collapse, showing the real cost of the war. For Rhett Butler, the scene might have highlighted his courage and quick thinking, making his character feel more grounded and understandable later in the movie. The cross-dressing rioter would have added a surprising touch to the scene. It might have challenged viewers to think about gender roles and social norms during that time, something not often explored in films of that era. This character would have brought an unexpected layer of depth to the film's depiction of Southern society. But this scene didn't make it into the final cut, and there were many reasons why. Producer David O. Selznick was very focused on keeping the movie's pacing and tone just right. The political climate of the 1930s also played a role. Selznick had to think about how the movie would be received by different groups, like the NAACP and the Daughters of the Confederacy. A scene showing lawlessness and destruction might have been too controversial for some viewers, and the cross-dressing rioter could have sparked even more debate. Money and practicality were also important. The production was already very expensive, with a budget of $3.9 million, huge for the time. Filming a large-scale scene with fires, crowds, and destruction would have added even more costs. David O. Selznick, the producer of Gone with the Wind, faced a huge challenge when turning Margaret Mitchell's novel into a movie. As a Jewish American, he understood the dangers of prejudice, especially as Nazism rose in Europe. This personal experience shaped how he wanted to show slavery and race in the film. He didn't want to make an anti-Negro film, as he explained in a letter to the screenwriter Sidney Howard. Selznick felt it was important to be careful and show black characters in a positive light. At the same time, he struggled with how to balance historical truth and sensitivity. This struggle showed up in a working document called the Rainbow Script, where different versions of scenes were debated. Some scenes included harsh portrayals of slavery, while others softened the reality to avoid negative stereotypes. Selznick even thought about using the N-word in the movie for historical accuracy. In a letter to writer Val Lewton, he said he regretted not being able to use it 2 or 3 times. This showed how torn he was between keeping the film authentic and making it acceptable to audiences of the time. The NAACP got involved early, fearing the film would reinforce harmful stereotypes. Walter White, the leader of the NAACP, wrote to Selznick about these concerns. Selznick replied, drawing comparisons between the struggles of African Americans and his own experiences as a Jewish man. He promised to leave out offensive material and said he was sensitive to minority issues. These conversations also involved the film's black cast members, especially Hattie McDaniel, who played Mammy. McDaniel reportedly refused to use the N-word in the movie, and it was ultimately left out. Some historians believe her stance played a key role in that decision. Even so, the film still faced criticism for romanticizing slavery and presenting racial stereotypes. The premiere of the movie in Atlanta brought more controversy. Georgia's segregation laws meant Hattie McDaniel and other black actors couldn't attend. While the movie celebrated its success, this moment showed the deep racial divisions of the time and added to the tension surrounding the film. One of the biggest changes Selznick made to the story was removing the Ku Klux Klan. In the novel, the Klan is portrayed as heroes protecting white Southerners. Selznick knew this would cause backlash, so he replaced the Klan with an unnamed group of vigilantes. For example, in the scene where Scarlett O'Hara is attacked in Shantytown, her rescuers aren't identified as Klansmen. He also had to change other parts of the story. In the book, Frank Kennedy, Scarlett's second husband, dies in a Klan raid. In the film, he dies in a more general act of vigilantism. Hattie McDaniel made history when she won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress on February 29, 1940. She was the first African American to win an Academy Award, but the moment wasn't without problems. The ceremony was held at the Coconut Grove restaurant in Los Angeles, which was segregated. McDaniel wasn't even allowed to attend at first because of the hotel's no blacks policy. Selznick stepped in to get her a seat, but even then, she wasn't allowed to sit with her co-stars. Instead, she was seated at a small table at the back of the room with her agent and escort. When McDaniel gave her acceptance speech, it was short but powerful. She said she hoped to always bring pride to her race and the movie industry. While it seemed modest, her words reflected the immense pressure she was under. Despite her historic win, McDaniel faced criticism from some in the black community. They accused her of playing roles that reinforced stereotypes, including her portrayal of Mammy. The NAACP, which had already spoken out against the film, was especially vocal. To add another layer of complexity, McDaniel's Oscar disappeared years later. She left it to Howard University, a historically black institution, but by 1971, it was missing. No one knows what happened to it, and its disappearance remains a mystery to this day. Gone with the Wind is one of the most famous movies ever, but in recent years, it has sparked big debates and controversy. In June 2020, HBO Max decided to temporarily remove it from their platform. This happened after George Floyd's death and the protests against racial injustice. Many people started rethinking how movies like this portray race and history. The decision wasn't the first time the movie faced backlash. In 2017, the Orpheum Theater in Memphis stopped its annual screenings after 34 years because the film was criticized for being insensitive about race. A lot of critics argue that Gone with the Wind makes slavery look less cruel than it was and romanticizes the South before the Civil War. One example is the character Mammy, played by Hattie McDaniel. While McDaniel made history by becoming the first black person to win an Oscar, her character is seen as a stereotype of the happy slave. The film also shows the Ku Klux Klan as heroic, which has drawn heavy criticism. However, not everyone agreed with removing the movie. After HBO Max took it down, the film became the best-selling movie on Amazon, showing how divided people are about it. HBO Max brought the film back just a couple of weeks later, on June 24, 2020. This time, they included a special introduction by Jacqueline Stewart, a film scholar. In her 4-minute video, she explained the film's problematic parts, like how it ignores the true horrors of slavery. She also talked about its importance in film history and how McDaniel's Oscar win was a groundbreaking moment. HBO Max didn't stop there. They added 2 more videos. One was a panel discussion from the TCM Classic Film Festival, and the other was about the film's portrayal of race and how it was adapted from the book. These editions aimed to help people understand the film's legacy without erasing it. Other companies have taken similar steps. For example, Disney Plus added warnings to older movies like Dumbo and Peter Pan, letting viewers know about outdated and offensive cultural depictions. But Disney made a stronger choice with Song of the South, a movie criticized for its portrayal of race. Unlike Gone with the Wind, Disney has kept Song of the South completely out of circulation in the US. It has never been released on home video or added to Disney Plus. Many people compare Gone with the Wind to newer films about slavery, like 12 Years a Slave and Django Unchained. These modern films show the brutal reality of slavery in a way Gone with the Wind didn't. For example, 12 Years a Slave is based on a true story and doesn't shy away from showing the violence and suffering enslaved people endured. It even won the Best Picture Oscar in 2014. Interestingly, an early script of Gone with the Wind included scenes showing physical violence against slaves, like threats to Mammy for not working hard enough. But those scenes were removed from the final film, leaving a much softer version of history. Despite all the criticism, Gone with the Wind is still incredibly popular. Its story is grand, the characters are memorable, and its themes of survival and resilience keep people drawn to it. Adjusted for inflation, it's one of the highest-grossing movies ever, earning about $3.7 billion in today's money. Lines like, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn," are still widely recognized, and the movie has inspired countless references, parodies, and homages in other media. The movie isn't just loved in America. Countries like France and Japan also see it as a classic piece of cinema, often without the same controversy it faces in the US. However, in the US, opinions about the film are divided. A 2020 poll showed that most white viewers rated the film highly, but only about 1/3 of black viewers felt the same. This difference shows how deeply the film's portrayal of race affects its audience.